beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me. My lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships that go sailing. Somewhere beyond the sea, she's there watching for me. If I could fly like birds on high, then straight to her arms I'll go sailing. It's far beyond the stars, it's near beyond the moon. I know beyond a doubt my heart will lead me there soon.
The joy of traveling, that feeling of going somewhere unknown, leaving behind your work, home, belonging, and other essential or non-essential boredom and obligations that we accumulate and lament in our lives, is something most of us are thrilled to seek. Perhaps this is our last affordable luxury. We have been trying to buy this temporary experience of well-being in distant, exotic places for a long time. Freedom to anonymously seek pleasure and only to return to our normal reality as a functioning members of a society until our next opportunity of escape arrives. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council report, travel and tourism was one of the world's largest sectors, accounting for 10.4% of global GDP, 9.2 trillion US dollars, and 10.6% of all jobs globally in 2019. China is one of the most significant contributors to global tourism. The report also suggests that by 2029, China will have nearly 67 new potentially international traveling households as its national economy continues to grow. According to the other reports, tourism produces roughly 5 to 8% of the world's carbon emissions, most of which are produced by different modes of transportation. All this changed suddenly in late 2019 when the COVID-19 outbreak hit the world. Since then, it has derailed our ability to travel again in the same way. Meanwhile, this has allowed us to think about traveling differently, not to travel more, but to examine its possible meaning and impact, going beyond our narrow scope of understanding based on the need for personal leisure. The irony of the technologically enabled convenient environment of today is that everything is so intertwined. However intimate and personal our travel experience may be, a giant and very self-conscious industry behind, at work, are truly global. There is hardly anything spontaneous about how this industry works, as it is driven by its desire for continued growth and expansion. Perhaps no other sector thrives on this hyperconnectivity than tourism. It is an all-encompassing field that connects transportation, geography, technology, culture, consumption, and migration. We must observe this subject from multiple angles to understand its full potential ramifications. Only then we can begin to decipher its impact on a given society. This short film will explore the origin and rise of modern tourism in China that has been taking place in the last several decades. The first chapter will begin with the current policy on sustainable rural development. To provide a better context behind the genesis of this policy, we will go back to the origin of China's modern development period, the reform and opening up era of the late 1970s, initiated by Deng Xiaoping. The second chapter will explore the initial result of what has followed since the reform. The rapid expansion of the Chinese economy created a series of significant social and technological changes in society. It also brought a complex set of challenges, and we will see how different actors have responded to meet and address these rapidly growing issues in the tourism sector and beyond. The third chapter will analyze travel's cultural and philosophical meaning in the historical context. Art and literature have always reflected the changing nature of the culture throughout history in China and the West. The idea of traveling played a very different role in the Chinese collective imagination for centuries before the arrival of modern tourism. The fourth and final chapter will focus on today's relationship between architecture and tourism. As China continues to prosper, its cultural sector is quickly becoming a new arena in the society where unforeseen set of creative negotiations and wagers are taking place among different participants in a seemingly open forum. Architecture serves the need and desire to define and fulfill the cultural void generated by modern China's new wealth. This instrumentalization of architecture has created a particular use and a development in China, which becomes a critical subtext when we look at its process and result. On the 15th of August 2005, Xi Jinping, who was the party secretary of Zhejiang province at that time, visited Anji County in Huzhou City, Zhejiang province. He then used the language Green Water and Blue Mountain are the Silver and Gold Mountain to signal a new direction in rural development on a regional scale. When he learned that U Village had shut down its mines and made a fortune by developing rural tourism, he spoke highly.
实际上，绿水青山就是竞争营生。熊掌和鱼不可兼得的时候，要知道放弃，要知道选择。所以刚才你们讲了，下决心停掉一些这个矿山这个都是高明之举。
9 days after investigating U Village, Xi Jinping used pseudonym Zixin to publish a short commentary. Green Water and Blue Mountain are also golden and silver mountains on the front page of Zhejiang Daily. He pointed out that green water can bring golden mountains, but golden mountains cannot buy green water. Therefore, Blue Mountain and Golden Mountains can both produce contradictions and can be dialectically unified. This idea illustrates the relationship between economic development and ecological protection. It also exemplifies a way of Chinese thinking, where conflicting and orderly views are resolved in a single abstract syntax. This statement is a profound expression of the role of natural resources for people and the importance of a sustainable development. It shows a shift in thinking regarding growth after rampant overdevelopment has left many parts of China tatters environmentally. The only way to gain wealth without destroying the environment is to find the right direction among the choices in order to utilize natural resources and transform them into a source of wealth that can continue to flow like water. In the 1980s and 1990s, Huzhou took the lead in encountering the acute contradiction between economic development and ecological and environmental protection. The traditional development approach brought severe ecological and environmental problems based on the overconsumption of natural resources. For example, in the case of Anji, the countryside can only make profits by resorting to environmentally damaging practices such as mining. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, the People's Commune system defined the economic framework of China. Collective farming was implemented in rural China, making most farmers become members of communes without any personal share. This top-down economic structure severely restricted significant growth and development opportunities for decades, until Deng Xiaoping ultimately introduced the reform and opening up. The reform and opening up is a significant turning point in Chinese history. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping looked for ways to transform China's economy. Reform of the country and opening abroad have brought a remarkable improvement in the country's economy and people's living standards and lifestyles. Instead of forced collective farming in rural areas, a household would work each plot. After handing over the mandatory quota of what they grew to the state and the commune, farmers could keep the surplus for themselves. That meant the harder they worked, the more they earned. This was the first sign of a market-driven economy in the communist China, and eventually it will begin to create a large portion of a middle-class household in the coming years. Today, things have changed again since the early days of the reform period. In addition to using land for agriculture or industrial production, people have started to develop more sustainable economic models. Essentially, the concept of green and blue mountain is still about pursuing the financial interest of the turning land into gold. But now, it is done with a gentler approach. The villagers shut down mines, built roads, developed homestays, and created family farms. The result? Ecological values are transformed into economic values. During his late life, in 1992, Deng Xiaoping visited Wuchang, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and Shanghai, and delivered important talks along the way to continue to promote his reform and opening up agenda. In the coming years, many middle-class households will eventually emerge in China. At the same time, the newly improved quality of living standard has led people to pursue leisurely life and entertainment. More and more people choose to travel and buy luxury goods. Travel has gradually become a vital source of consumption in the new China. In recent years, tourism and ecotourism have gradually become a trend in rural economic development. Green water and blue mountain have become an essential criterion for rural ecological development. In 2017, the 19th National People's Congress of the Communist Party of China elaborated on this theory in greater depth. The transformation of green mountains into golden mountains includes changing the value of ecological resources and the green transformation of economic activities. General Secretary Xi Jinping pointed out that a sound ecological environment is the fairest public good and benefits people's livelihood. The party believes that the threshold for exploiting ecological resources must be raised and regulated through environmental governance and protection, leading to a significant increase in the cost of using natural elements and a shift to a higher quality of a green and sustainable development. Practicing the concept of green, ecological, and sustainable development with the help of the existing geographical advantage and excellent surrounding tourism environment brings different tourism experiences to people. It shows the elegant demeanor of cultural tourism projects. Before the reform era, the average daily lives of people in China were very different and challenging. There were no commercial activities like what we have today, and people needed permission to do nearly everything. The permission can be in different forms: tickets for food, approval for aviation, or train travel, an indicator of a distribution between urban and rural areas, and work permits. A series of reforms introduced more favorable policies and allowed greater freedom and mobility of the people to boost economic activities. This will gradually raise the income and spending power of the general public, which will ignite tourism development in modern China. In March 1995, the State Council established a two-day weekend policy to provide workers with more time for rest and leisure. Suddenly, people had time to spend outside of their work, literally. With extra time and wages, the first wave of consumption slowly began in China. More people tended to enjoy their weekends in different locations outside of their homes. The development and reform of the transportation also followed. Private automobile licenses were issued. Construction work for public transportation began in major cities, including high-speed train lines, allowing a greater movement in distance and expanding the public's traveling circle. The reform and opening up pushed economic growth to the limits of a scale and speed. Nowhere is this rapid change present than in urban development. As indicated by the satellite images, Shanghai has been expanded and urbanized at a frantic rate. Cranes, towers, and scaffoldings grew up everywhere, day in and day out. Today, it has become a central financial and tourism hub in China. The fast economic growth also propelled and penetrated the development of tourism. However, problems are happening at the same time.
说了一句话，叫做9个月磨刀，3个月宰羊。谁是羊啊？大家都是羊。其实是什么样的呢？雪乡的消费高，那么在景区里边，我相信你去任何一个地方旅游，那么景区的东西卖的都是要比平时贵了一些的。所以说呢，这个地方它虽然消费高，但是它可以理解。为什么？如果你家在这个地方1年你只营业3个月，那你得把1年钱都挣回来。如果是你，你也会这么做的。那一会儿到了前边，到了二郎河景区，我们去吃饭。 那我们吃的饭是什么饭？叫做忆苦思甜饭，苦到解放前。那么它也叫做什么？游客给它起名叫做生命维持餐。那么团餐它就是这样的，团餐你去任何一个地方旅游，团餐它都不好吃。那么起码呀，它要比海南好一点。海南的米饭都是生的，对不对呀
The black tourism usually happened inside the touring groups, with formats of misleading advertisements, compulsory consumption, unbearable food, and poor hotel conditions. All the above mentioned things are due to the market dynamics out of economic imbalance. From the early 2010s, the gradual and conditional opening of one-child policy brought more children into the population, which created more demand for leisure and tourism activities. However, the growing speed of tourism sites and infrastructure simply could not keep up with the increasing pace of the population. In other words, demand was significantly higher than supply. In addition, there were other issues where many tourist sites contained hastily put makeshift facilities by the opportunistic individuals who saw and took advantage of unregulated market conditions, charging overpriced fees for everything they could. Tourism development has been connected closely with the national economy. It fluctuates as the economy grows and shrinks. It can occupy nearly 50% of a regional GDP in provinces like Yunnan, where tourism is the primary source of income. Black tourism has become an issue that must be regulated and managed. In May 2011, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress started a series of seminars preparing for establishing tourism law procedures. On October 1st, 2013, the Regulations to Travel Agency and Touring Guide was established, starting the regulations work. One thing that regulation provides is the transparency of information. Apart from the legal requirement, the increased development of new e-commerce also helped to regulate the industry. People can order food, buy tickets, and see tourist spots evaluations. Today, we see less black tourism. More infrastructure and upgraded facilities have become a norm. However, there is also a new set of problems and challenges ahead. As seen in the case of COVID-19, any global pandemic poses a big problem that brings strict travel restrictions, countless tests, and an endless quarantine cycle. The increased divorce rate and decreased marriage and birth rates have provided more time for individuals than families to travel, changing the target audience of the travel industry. The continuous rise of smartphone technology and social media also propelled this shift as we spend more time with our phones than with real people. However, in the long run, these demographic changes in society will inevitably decrease the overall number of potential travelers in the future. Mass traveling will likely continue, but its number and unit of scale will be gradually reduced. Meanwhile, a new ambitious plan for mobility and distribution is underway. Pearl River Delta Economic Zone proposes 1-hour life circle, extending the commute radius for large territory, connecting Hong Kong, Macau, Zhuhai, and Shenzhen at a specific time. The integrated network of high-speed trains airports, and public transit with rapid transfer terminals will test this audacious exercise of a megacity to change the known limits of cities in the future. Under the influence of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, people in ancient China traveled for centuries, seeking different destinations and goals. Some traveled to pursue the grand ideal of helping the world. Some traveled to improve their state of mind and body. And some traveled to escape from constant social unrest, to achieve personal independence and tranquility. They traveled and they have yearned to travel far away. This anticipation of travel was deeply hidden and embedded in the unconsciousness of the Chinese psyche and has influenced the collective imagination since ancient times. Confucius traveled around China, studying and lobbying, trying to realize his utopian ideals of governing the country. Words from Lao Tzu: "For man is abstracted from the world from the universe from the Tao, and the Tao from nature," inspired countless ancient Taoists to travel to the far-reaching places in search of auspicious scenery to find their Tao of nature. In the 16th century, during the Ming Dynasty, Journey to the West also described why monks in ancient times traveled so far when they preached Buddhism to the public. It was transforming the alms around the world into the source of all saving living beings. As one of the most famous Chinese classical fictions, Journey to the West not only described a strange folk and mythical world filled with multiple religious demigods and monsters, but also told a story of a personal growth through traveling far away. At the same time, thanks to the prosperity of the publishing industry, ordinary people in the Ming Dynasty could also imagine the stories in Journey to the West by reading the illustrations in the book. The story told growth of a monkey who was born from a stone. The monkey's name is Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. He traveled around the world to learn from the master patriarch Bodhi and protected Tripitaka's pilgrimage to the West, a historical event based on a real journey of a Tang Dynasty Buddhist monk named Xuanzang. The group experienced various hardships during the journey and gradually congealed, becoming a great team. In modern times, martial art fiction swept the whole of China. Chivalrous heroes described in martial art fiction who traveled around, upheld justice, and enjoyed life became the ideal image among Chinese teenagers at the time. This image was also accompanied by the idea of faraway journey that brought people's travel expectations from ancient China to modern times. Meanwhile, as a symbol of a far distance, the concept of a jianghu reflected the chivalrous spirit of a martial art fiction and the drama and narrative of the journey. Even today, people can see the influence of jianghu in real life.
江湖，我都不知道江湖是什么。
就是我们武林人士出出入入的地方，就叫做江湖。
其实走江湖是件很痛苦的事。
我根本没想过做武林盟主，可是偶尔，我还是会行下账。
江湖里卧虎藏龙，人心里何尝不是？刀剑里藏凶，人情里何尝不是？
施主，时日无多，放下心事和怨恨，也许还有一线生机。
这3年来，我每天都觉得这个江湖好大，提心吊胆你的安危。
你稍想离家，还记得回家的路吗？
想清楚，一旦饮下这药灰，你就是另外一个人。
寒江孤影，江湖故人，相逢何必曾相识。
Later, with the support of the reform and opening up policy for domestic tourism and the popularization of television, the 1986 edition of Journey to the West TV series has become a commonly shared memory for younger generation of Chinese. Through the expression of moving images, the TV series made the Monkey King a household image again and showed the local customs and landscapes of different parts of China in full, vivid color. The TV show rekindled popular imagination and contributed to the ongoing interest in tourism, bringing the vision of ancient mythical landscapes into the reality of a people's common living rooms in China. The Chinese economy has expanded considerably since the reform and opening up of the late 1970s. The growth brought significant demographic changes to modern Chinese society. This also enabled a new pattern of mass consumption based on the increased spending power of middle-class households. More and more Chinese people are willing to spend money and time on entertainment and tourism. In addition, at the state level, China was actively improving its international status. Beijing hosted the Summer Olympics in 2008, and Shanghai hosted Expo in 2010. This signaled the beginning of large-scale international events and projects among major cities in China. Demand for venues and buildings for such events were increasing. From the late 1990s to the early 2000s, we see an initial period of China's architectural boom. Many foreign star architects came to design key buildings in important cities, such as the Bird's Nest by Herzog and de Meuron in 2008 in Beijing, the Guangzhou Grand Theater by Zaha Hadid in 2010, and the Central Television Headquarters, CCTV, by Rem Koolhaas and OMA in 2012. Architecture became a symbol of a various institutional legitimacy and a travel destination simultaneously. After seeing the success of Beijing and other cities, smaller cities subsequently copied this propaganda model by attracting new architecture. However, like in the rise of modern tourism in China, the recent architecture boom was driven more by demand than supply. This context created a burst of new architectural styles that simply could not keep up with the speed of a production, causing a rift between form, function, and aesthetics. The new China form buildings were emerging. They are either peculiar in shape or casually imitated foreign structures, unsightly and out of tune with the environment. The variety and mixture of output ranged from classical to modern, cliché to bizarre. All forms are permissible, and overall, the shared promiscuity of different and incompatible styles began to define China form.
Vous parlez français? Oui, vous parlez français? 挺有意思的。Au revoir.
稍微偏了一点啊，这边房价便宜，就说他这边房子很漂亮哦，但是入住的人呢，好像都是看好它的便宜，很少看到它的这种风格啊，因为啊。
In 2014, national leaders and the government proposed to ban these strange structures and reiterated them into an official policy. In April 2021, the National Development and Reform Commission issued the key tasks for new type urbanization and urban-rural integration development in 2021, requiring the implementation of applicable economic, green, and beautiful architectural policies in the new era and the construction of ugly buildings, whatever that means, is increasingly prohibited. Once again, the government stepped in to manage the situation that was becoming unmanageable. This changing official attitude towards architectural expression was also met with the rise of a new type of China form. The turning point of this ethos was when Wang Xu won the Pritzker Prize in 2012. He opened up new horizons in Chinese architecture, using local building materials to design buildings tailored to local conditions. It presented a break from the existing pastiche of styles by the Chinese-born an educated architect with no foreign experience.
His buildings project new horizons, while at the same time resonating with actual places and personal memories.
不同的位置上，这个水流下去，像龙一样，中国人管这个叫龙出水。
His strong character and innovative philosophy challenged the stereotypes of traditional design.
我使用大量的回收的材料，像我们象山校园大概用了几千万片碎的砖啊、瓦呀。
Born in 1963 and educated in China, Wang Shu won the 2012 Pritzker Prize at a relatively young age for an architect.
Exploration of bamboo, local bricks, roof tiles, and make it in an abstract way to be applicable to the modern times.
Since then, many regionalist buildings imitating Wang Shu have emerged across China, and it has steadily become a commonly used form of architecture. In addition to this shift towards regionalist architecture, rural governments promoted local tourism in their areas by transforming existing buildings in traditional villages with the aid of the next generation of Chinese architects. A good example of this model is in Songyang village in Zhejiang province, which has been transformed into a set of beautifully executed projects. However, the project is not without its criticism. It has turned the village into its caricature. The villagers perform their traditional crafts for the organized visitors, while many newly renovated structures are seldomly occupied or used on limited occasions. With the additional publication of the books and the reports on the internet, the building has received more online visits than actual visits. In urban areas, this model of architectural development takes a slightly different approach. Architecture remains a way of creating a destination, but the additional idea of culture is now introduced and integrated. For example, many new cultural buildings have sprung up along the Huangpu River in Shanghai. Many of these buildings are renovated. Existing industrial complexes abandoned as Shanghai transitioned from an industrial to a financial city during the reform era. The number and scale of these projects have increased over the last decade, creating miles of museums, galleries, and public spaces along the urban edge. On the one hand, this has created an excellent opportunity for many Chinese architects to work and experiment with large-scale urban projects, creating some of the most exciting and innovative architecture today in China. However, like in rural areas, the building often lacks frequent usage. The irony of culture is that it can be interpreted into anything and nothing concomitantly due to its open and suggestive nature, making it difficult to translate into a clear architectural language or program. Cultural architecture has created a new phase in China form that is neither regionalist nor stylistic cliché. It shows a greater awareness of the land, time, and material. However, it also created a dilemma of so much architecture with very few activities to fill. The result is the surreal panorama of architectural ruins that consists of new buildings instead of the old buildings in decay, a void filled with immense silence and stillness, followed by sporadic noise of actions. Is this our destination? Or different beginning? As we conclude our journey on the outskirts of Shanghai, we find ourselves stuck in a strange scenery where both new and old are being dismantled and put together at once. This spectacle is not unique to one place, as many more buildings are aground in hundreds of cities and countryside. Somewhere in China, we will come across the endless sight of rubbles and debris with the amalgamated scent of whatever stood before. From the reclusive vistas of Jianghu, hermetic ancient scroll paintings, and the fantastic scenes from Journey to the West, the Chinese landscape has presented us with a vivid imagination of utopian visions. But today's omnipresent ruin is not a projection of our imagination. In contrast, it offers very little vision, but it is a powerful reality with unmatched irony of uncertainty. Perhaps for the first time in history, our existence has become more potent than our imagination.